In the early hours of dawn, a middle-aged man stirs from his sleep in a gritty city alleyway. As the sun peeks over the horizon, he slowly wakes, feeling a throbbing ache in his head. To his bewilderment, he discovers a small girl curled up on top of him. Startled, the girl scrambles to her feet and nervously wishes him a good morning. She struggles to explain her presence, her words stumbling out in a flurry. The man's mind races, and he hastily reaches for his bag, only to find it contains just a single coin. His eyes widen in shock, and anger rises in his chest. He accuses the girl of stealing his money, but she protests, her voice trembling with sincerity. She insists she didn't take it, and the man, driven by frustration, shakes her shoulder roughly. The girl bursts into tears, pleading with him that she is telling the truth. The man, now feeling a pang of guilt, pulls back and asks why his money is missing. The girl, through her sobs, reveals that he used it to buy her. Stunned, the man looks at the fragile child and struggles to believe he would have paid for someone in her dire condition. His mind races to remember the previous day's events. As he rubs his eyes, fragments of memory begin to piece together. He recalls that yesterday was the city's annual festival. After an adventurous day exploring the dungeon, he and his companions had stopped by a trading company. There, an employee evaluated their haul: wine spirit blessing amulets, enchanted jewels, and a small magic-resistant shield. The total value was 25 gold coins. His party had been elated, realizing that each of them would receive a generous share of the spoils. It had been a long time since they had hit such a jackpot, and they eagerly discussed their next dive into the dungeon. One of the party members, brimming with excitement, suggested they should all have a toast to celebrate their win. Another member chimed in, proposing they should go out with a bang. They called out to Harris, urging him to join them for a celebratory drink. But Harris, feeling a familiar sense of detachment, picked up his bag and declined, saying he'd pass and would see them later. One party member, watching him leave, remarked that Harris was not a very social guy. Another, with a smirk, added that thieves were always like that. Though one member scolded him for the comment, Harris was already out the door, indifferent to their chatter. Harris made his way to a bar in the city, seeking solace in the anonymity of the crowded establishment. He ordered ale and snacks from the bartender and, with a sigh of frustration, muttered an apology to himself for being a thief. He reminisced about his role at the Adventurers Guild, a scout. His duties involved detecting and disarming traps, ensuring doors and chests were safe, identifying items, and mapping enemy positions. It was a thankless job that, unlike the flashy combat roles, garnered little respect. The others often spoke behind his back, likening his work to that of a bandit. Drumming his fingers on the bar, Harris reflected on the camaraderie he missed. He didn't mind drinking. It was the company he found lacking. He mused that he might have joined the celebration if he had a chance to get closer to Elia, the priestess, or Aisha, the mage. But he dismissed the thought, believing they would never pay attention to someone like him, a filthy bandit. His thoughts were interrupted when the bartender placed his ale in front of him, telling him to enjoy. Harris, mustering a smile, asked her when her shift would end. The bartender, a bit flustered, asked if he was trying to hit on her. She gave him a once-over and then apologized, explaining that because of the festival, she had to work until morning. Hearing that, Harris nods and says he understands. The bartender gives him a sympathetic smile and tells him to enjoy his drink. After finishing his ale, Harris leaves the bar, handing over his payment without waiting for his change. As the bartender calls out to him, he waves her off, saying there's no need. Walking down the street, Harris feels a mix of frustration and indignation. He questions whether he really looks that shabby to her. However, he shrugs it off, deciding he has the money to splurge on something more entertaining. Determined to have some fun, Harris heads to a high-class brothel. At the entrance, a guard stops him, asking if he needs something from their establishment. Harris confidently replies that he's there to buy a girl, flashing his money. The guard, unimpressed, informs him that their services require payment in gold coins. He suggests that Harris must be mistaken about the type of place this is and directs him to another street lined with shops more suited to his means. Infuriated, Harris grabs the guard's cloak and demands to be let in, insisting he has money. The guard, unfazed, punches Harris in the gut, causing him to double over in pain. The guard then sneers at him, saying that even if he could pay, he doesn't belong there, and tells him to get lost. As the city's festival continues in full swing, Harris finds himself wandering the streets alone, a bottle in hand. His frustration mounts as he watches others reveling in the festivities. Stumbling along, he bumps into a man accompanied by a girl. The man shoves Harris aside, calling him an idiot and telling him to watch where he's going. Harris manages to lean against a nearby shop, trying to steady himself. The shopkeeper, annoyed, tells Harris he's blocking the entrance, while the girl with the man remarks on how dirty and drunk Harris looks. The shopkeeper adds his own scolding, telling Harris to move along. Feeling a throbbing headache, Harris resumes his aimless walk, the sounds of the festival grating on his nerves. Everyone around him seems to be having the time of their lives, and it fills him with disgust. He thinks to himself that they should all just shut the hell up. Harris finds the festival crowd overwhelming, wondering what people find so enjoyable about it. Everything feels frustrating to him. He contemplates if there's any place where he truly belongs, as it seems everyone mocks him. Lost in these thoughts, he suddenly bumps into someone and absent-mindedly apologizes. Looking up, he sees a small, weak-looking girl, shackled and frail. At that moment, memories flood back. Harris recalls getting drunk and wasting his money the previous night. He remembers stumbling past the slave market and, in his inebriated state, buying this girl. He now sees her clearly. Her body is covered in grease and dust, her ribs painfully visible. A huge wound from a blade mars her cheek. Her nails are peeled off, and her limbs bear the scars of numerous whippings. It seems unbelievable that he paid 3 gold coins for her, a sum that could have allowed him to live comfortably for 2 more months. Harris, feeling a pang of regret, asks the girl if she remembers the way back to the slave trader. Together, they make their way there. Confronting the slave trader, Harris explains the situation, hoping to return the girl. The trader, however, sees a problem with this request. Harris apologizes profusely, admitting he was drunk and promising to pay the document fee. The trader considers for a moment, and agrees to take her back, but only for 10 silver coins, which was a fifth of the original price. Shocked, Harris protests. The slave trader explains that a child like her is worth very little, as used goods have minimal value. He adds that keeping slaves is costly, and if she dies, it's a significant loss. Even if he takes her back, she'll likely be sold to a show house. Harris is horrified to learn that these houses pit children against ogres in gruesome shows where the ogres chase and eat the children for the amusement of the wealthy. Conflicted, Harris asks the trader what he should do. The trader indifferently replies that it's up to Harris. Deciding he can't leave her to such a fate, Harris takes the girl with him. They sit by a fountain, where he uses the water to clean his face, then offers the girl his mug, instructing her to drink and wash her face. As she complies, he muses over the new burden he has taken on, now penniless. The girl, after cleaning her face, returns the mug with a shy smile. Harris notices that her face isn't as bad as he initially thought. Her stomach grumbles loudly, and she hurriedly covers it, apologizing in fear. Harris, feeling sympathetic, gives her some food. She hesitates, confused, but eventually takes it. Watching her eat ravenously, Harris wonders how horribly she's been treated. The girl begins to cry tears of joy as she eats, trying to wipe them away but failing. Harris feels a deep sympathy for her. Once she finishes the food, Harris decides that he has no choice but to care for her now. He thinks that if he's going to keep her, she should at least have more meat on her bones and wear decent clothes. Waiting for her to grow into a proper woman isn't a bad idea either. He turns to the girl and gently asks her name. She replies, Tiana. Harris introduces himself and tells her that from this day onward, he is her master. Tiana, with a newfound spark in her eyes, excitedly agrees. Harris realized they needed to address Tiana's condition first and told her to follow him. As they walked through the crowded streets, people cast skeptical glances at Tiana, who looked frail and injured. Ignoring the stares, Harris led her to the temple. Inside, Elia, the priestess, greeted Harris with a warm smile. It was rare for him to visit the temple, and she remarked on his absence from the previous night's celebration. Harris, feeling uncomfortable, reluctantly acknowledged her words. Elia was known for her healing abilities and often accompanied adventurers on their dungeon expeditions. Harris quickly explained the situation, showing Elia the extent of Tiana's injuries. He described the numerous scars on her face and arms, noting that her back was in even worse condition. He also expressed concern about her awkward gait, suggesting that her bones might be broken. Elia's concern deepened as she gently took Tiana's hand, asking if Harris was responsible for her injuries. Before Harris could respond, Tiana hurriedly defended him, insisting that he was not to blame. The temple members began whispering among themselves, casting judgmental looks at Harris. Elia, with a hint of regret, commented that Harris seemed to be living up to his reputation as a thief. Frustration welled up inside Harris as he felt the familiar sting of misjudgment. However, Tiana, with a sudden burst of courage, shouted that Elia was wrong. She explained how Harris had given her his cloak when she was shivering and had provided her with food instead of keeping it for himself. She insisted that the wounds were not inflicted by Harris, and described him as a kind person. Tears streamed down Tiana's cheeks as she spoke, leaving both Harris and Elia astonished. Realizing her mistake, Elia bowed deeply to Harris and apologized for her harsh words. She acknowledged that, despite being a servant of God, she had lashed out unjustly. Harris, still reeling from Tiana's unexpected defense, assured Elia that it was fine. Elia then turned her attention to Tiana, promising to take full responsibility for her treatment, and gently asked her to follow her into the temple for healing. Elia took Tiana to the intersection of the temple and asked for her name. Tiana introduced herself timidly. Elia then began to undress Tiana, warning her that the process might sting a little. As she poured water over Tiana's wounds, Tiana winced in pain. Elia explained that cleaning the wounds was necessary before treatment, and asked Tiana to bear with it a little longer. Tiana reluctantly agreed. Elia apologized for Tiana's suffering and reflected on how despising someone based on appearance or occupation and accusing others unjustly was disgraceful, especially for a priestess. Curious about Tiana's situation, Elia asked why she was with Harris. Tiana recounted her tragic past. When she was little, her father was killed by monsters, leaving her alone and vulnerable. Unable to stay at home, she was sold. Her life since then had been filled with suffering, abuse, and pain. Elia listened with a heavy heart, noting the severity of Tiana's wounds. Despite her ordeal, Tiana expressed gratitude that Harris had bought her and treated her kindly. She smiled at Elia, confident that she would be fine from now on. Moved by Tiana's resilience, Elia hugged her and assured her that she would indeed be fine. She acknowledged Tiana's hardships and praised her for maintaining her pure spirit, believing that God would watch over her. Meanwhile, Harris waited in the temple hall, reflecting on the moment Tiana had fiercely defended him. He recalled her tearful declaration that he was a kind person, despite having only met him the previous day. He wondered why she trusted him so much. Elia returned and apologized for the wait, informing him that Tiana's treatment was complete. Harris was amazed to see Tiana fully healed and dressed up. He thanked Elia for her help. As Tiana went to get some water, Elia shared more about Tiana's past. She revealed that after her real father passed away, her stepfather always called her useless, and that she had other siblings, but she was the only one sold. Elia requested that Harris take good care of her, to which Harris, embarrassed, agreed, nervously thinking about his ulterior motives. Elia, seeing a different side of Harris, expressed her newfound appreciation for him. She admitted that her previous judgments were clouded. Then, she retrieved an amulet from under her clothes and handed it to him. Harris was surprised by its warmth and asked what it was. Elia explained that it was one of the temple's friendship signs, granting him free treatment at any temple. Harris was shocked, knowing that the amulet was rumored to be worth 100 gold coins. Elia expressed her gratitude to Harris, explaining that he reminded her of an important commandment: never judge a person by their appearance or occupation. She smiled, acknowledging that among those who used lockpicking and anti-trap techniques, there were good people too. She also told Harris that he didn't have to pay for Tiana's treatment that day. As Harris pondered the day's unexpected turns, Tiana returned with water, looking confused by the exchange. Sometime later, Harris and Tiana set out from the city, heading towards Harris's home. Harris informed Tiana that the journey would take 7 days and instructed her to follow him closely without falling behind. Tiana, her spirits lifted by her newfound freedom, happily agreed. As they walked, Harris inquired about Tiana's leg. She responded with a leap of joy, saying that it felt much easier to walk now. Curious, she asked Harris about his work. Harris explained that he was an adventurer, tasked with various jobs such as searching for items, carrying important documents, and participating in dungeon expeditions. He added that he would do almost anything for money, portraying his job as versatile but somewhat unremarkable compared to warriors and mages who were more suited for combat. Tiana's eyes lit up with excitement, finding it amazing that Harris could handle such a wide range of tasks. Harris, feeling a bit self-conscious, looked away and acknowledged her praise. He noted that his role was quite simple compared to the more combat-focused classes. Tiana then asked about his weapon, eyeing his sword. Harris admitted that he used it occasionally, though not as frequently as the more combat-oriented adventurers. As the sun began to set, Harris announced that they would need to camp outside for the night. Tiana agreed, ready for the break from their journey. However, as they continued down the road, Harris suddenly became alert. He quickly picked up Tiana and hid behind a nearby tree, startling her. Tiana, confused and frightened, tried to ask what was wrong, but Harris silenced her with a gesture. His frustration was evident as he realized that taking a shortcut had led them into a dangerous situation. Through the foliage, he spotted large ogres roaming nearby, their presence causing Tiana to tremble with fear. Harris peered cautiously at the ogres, noting that there was still a fair distance between them. He considered the option of hiding and letting the creatures pass, hoping they might be unaware of their presence. However, as he watched the ogres drool and sniff the air, Harris realized something was amiss. The ogres were muttering about human women, and then, little girl, their drooling increasing, which made Harris understand they had picked up on their scent. Without hesitation, Harris picked up Tiana, who was bewildered by the sudden action. He told her to remain silent, warning her that speaking might endanger them. As he began to run, Harris's mind raced with the implications of their situation. He noted that there were 3 ogres and, while he could handle them alone, this situation was much more complex. The ogres, driven by an unusually strong sense of hunger and equipped with excellent noses, would track them relentlessly even if they maintained their distance. This meant that, no matter how far they ran, the ogres would continue to pursue them until they were too exhausted to continue. Despite the ogres' slower pace, their determination made them a persistent threat. Harris struggled to keep up the pace, and soon, his exhaustion began to show. Tiana, recalling the traumatic memories of her father being killed by ogres, insisted on getting down from his arms, which puzzled Harris. She smiled through her fear and asked him to leave her behind. Harris protested, arguing that if they left her, the ogres would catch up to them quickly. Tiana explained that she believed staying behind might buy him some time, even though she was scared. She began to cry, apologizing for not being able to repay him and expressing her fear that her presence might endanger him as well. Despite her pleas, Harris's frustration boiled over, and he scolded her for being foolish, emphasizing the danger of being caught. However, he quickly recognized her courage and determination. With a resigned sigh, he patted her on the head and reassured her, explaining that he wasn't running blindly. There were useful resources around, and although he wasn't a combat specialist, he was an adventurer, and he had his own way of handling problems. Harris drew his weapons, a glint of resolve in his eyes. He declared that he would now show Tiana how a thief deals with such threats. Tiana, despite her fear, looked on with amazement at his readiness to confront their perilous situation. As time passed, the 3 ogres resumed their search and eventually arrived at the spot where Harris and Tiana had been. One of the ogres, sniffing the air, detected Tiana's scent and alerted the others. They quickly sprinted towards the direction of the scent, eager to capture her. Upon reaching the area, the ogres were surprised to find only Tiana's dress and no sign of her. Suddenly, a rope sprang from the shadows, wrapping around one of the ogre's legs. The other end of the rope was anchored to a nearby tree, causing the ogre to be hoisted into the air. The trapped ogre roared in confusion, while the other 2 laughed, with one calling him an idiot and the other commenting on the cleverness of the trap. The ensnared ogre, growing increasingly frustrated, struggled to free himself, declaring that the girl was his prey. Just then, another rope appeared and wrapped around his neck. The ogre was yanked backward and fell heavily to the ground, to the shock of his companions. The 2 remaining ogres were horrified to see that their comrade had been killed by a sharp wooden stake driven through his chest. Panic set in for the remaining ogres. They began calling for help, with one stepping back in fear and questioning what had happened. Harris, who had been silently observing from behind a tree, seized the moment. He emerged and lunged at one of the ogres, driving his sword through its neck. The ogre bled profusely, writhing in agony before succumbing to its injuries. Seeing their ally fall, the last ogre was overwhelmed by fear. It let out a terrified scream and began wildly swinging its club, demolishing the trees around it. Suddenly it heard a girl scream from a nearby cave and charged towards the sound, vowing to kill whoever was there. As the ogre swung its club, a small stone struck its head, causing it to swing its weapon blindly in the direction of the stone, but finding nothing. More stones began to rain down from various directions, heightening the ogre's confusion and anxiety. Harris, perched silently atop a tree and waiting for the opportune moment, saw the ogre turn its attention back towards him. With precise timing, he leaped down and drove his sword into the ogre's neck. The ogre let out a final, gurgling scream before collapsing, swiftly dispatched by Harris's attack. After the final ogre fell, Harris wiped the blood from his face and sheathed his sword. He approached the cave where Tiana had sought refuge and called out to her, asking if she was okay. Tiana, still wrapped in a cloak, responded with a quiet, "Yes." Harris peered into the cave and expressed his concern, admitting that he had been frightened when he heard her scream. Tiana, feeling embarrassed and exposed, apologized, explaining that she had let out a cry when a tree fell as she tried to avoid it. Harris looked away, saying he understood and was relieved she was safe. He then suggested that she put her clothes back on. As Tiana dressed, the sun dipped below the horizon, and night settled in. Harris and Tiana sat by a crackling campfire, roasting sausages. Tiana, addressing Harris as "Master," marveled at how incredible he had been during the ordeal. Harris downplayed his actions, but Tiana expressed her fear during the chase, believing they were doomed. Harris explained that confronting the ogres head-on would have been difficult, but by taking them out one by one and using their poor eyesight to their advantage, they managed to overcome the threat. He mentioned that the real challenge was drawing their attention and eliminating the first ogre, which had been crucial. Harris then praised Tiana, attributing their success to her. Confused, Tiana asked about his comment. Harris clarified that her clothes had inadvertently caught the ogre's attention, giving him the opportunity to act. He reassured her that, in a way, it was her unexpected contribution that had made their victory possible. Tiana, still a bit flustered, recalled how surprised she was when Harris had asked her to remove her clothes. Harris, feeling a bit embarrassed himself, nodded in agreement. He handed her some food, urging her to eat and get some rest. They would have to continue their journey the next day, so Tiana should be prepared. With renewed enthusiasm, Tiana accepted the food and responded with an eager "yes," ready for whatever lay ahead. Over the next few days, Harris and Tiana traveled through various towns, experiencing different types of accommodations and meals. Eventually, they arrived at their destination. As they approached, Harris pointed out to Tiana the town of Norn, where they would live from now on. Tiana looked on with excitement, eager to see their new home. Upon entering the town, they walked through the bustling streets until Harris finally stopped in front of a modest house. He announced to Tiana that this was his house. Tiana gazed at the structure, amazed at the place her master called home. Inside, Harris set his bag on the table, noting the dust that had settled in his absence. Meanwhile, Tiana explored the house, taking in every detail. Harris called out to her, snapping her back to attention. He informed her that he was heading out for a while and instructed her to take care of things while he was gone. He also pointed to a specific room and warned her not to touch the chest inside. Tiana eagerly agreed, wishing him a good day but seeming thoughtful about something as he left. Harris made his way to the Norn Adventurers Guild. He handed a document to the receptionist, who recognized it as a certificate of conquest for a 5th-tier dungeon. The receptionist registered it as an achievement. Harris then handed over a pouch, requesting the reward for its contents. The receptionist opened the pouch, revealing ogre ears, and acknowledged Harris's continued efforts in monster hunting. He suggested that Harris might be interested in similar jobs in the future, but Harris declined, stating it was business as usual. The receptionist processed the reward, asking Harris to wait a moment. Afterward, Harris visited an accessories shop. The owner greeted him warmly, remarking that it had been a while since they last met. Harris handed him a pair of earrings, asking for repairs. The shop owner inspected the earrings, noting their age but admiring their quality. He mentioned that some damaged parts would need to be replaced, and Harris gave his consent. The shop owner, curious about the unusual request, hinted at Harris's rare interest in accessories and speculated about a possible reason. Harris, feeling annoyed, urged him to focus on the repairs. The shop owner assured him that the repairs would be done and provided a receipt, estimating the cost at 3 copper coins. He then made a playful remark about not being able to fix Harris's perceived shortcomings, to which Harris responded with frustration. As Harris left, the shop owner reminded him to pick up the earrings the next day. With his errands complete, Harris headed back home. Upon his return, he found Tiana diligently working around the house, eager to show her progress. Harris settled in, ready to embrace their new life in Norn. As Harris returned home, he was greeted by Tiana's excited voice saying, "Welcome home, master!" He was astonished to see how clean the inside of his house looked. Noticing his reaction, Tiana worriedly apologized, explaining that she had cleaned it on her own. Harris reassured her, saying he was just surprised, which made Tiana glad. She then pulled back a chair at the dining table and eagerly requested Harris to take a seat, promising to bring his meal right away. This confused Harris, but he complied. Tiana soon brought his meal and explained that she had simmered the dried meat left over from their trip with herbs and root vegetables from the garden. Harris nervously acknowledged this, thinking he had previously mistaken those plants for weeds. Tiana's excitement was palpable as she waited for him to taste the food. Harris took a bite and declared it delicious, praising Tiana as a good cook. Hearing this, Tiana blushed heavily and covered her face in embarrassment. Harris then invited her to sit down and eat with him, which worried Tiana. She expressed concern that she couldn't do that, but Harris insisted, handing her his bowl and asking for a second serving. Tiana excitedly agreed. After finishing their meal, Harris relaxed in the living room. Tiana asked if he'd like to rest in bed, but Harris mentioned he needed to take a shower first. Tiana smiled and quickly sprinted off to prepare the bath, which made Harris feel glad. After some time, Tiana called him to inform him that the bath was ready. Harris got up and headed to the backyard, where he found that Tiana had prepared hot water and all the necessary items for a bath. Harris was touched by her thoughtfulness. Just then, Tiana approached and asked to excuse herself, offering to wash his back. Harris turned around, shocked by her suggestion. As Harris turned around, he found that Tiana was still wearing some clothes, and her thin frame was apparent. His expression turned to disappointment. Noticing this, Tiana asked if she had bothered him. Harris quickly reassured her, saying no and thanking her. Hearing that, Tiana excitedly expressed her relief, while Harris thought to himself that he should make sure to feed her more later. Tiana then enthusiastically urged him to hurry, warning that the water would get cold. Harris nervously began to take off his clothes, agreeing with her. As Tiana washed Harris's back, she shared how, during her treatment at the temple, being cleaned in the temple bath had felt so good, and she wished she could wash his back too. Harris acknowledged her story, and Tiana ecstatically mentioned that even Elia had washed her like this. Surprised, Harris asked if Elia had really washed her. Tiana excitedly confirmed it. Harris's mind wandered, imagining being in a bath with Elia. He pictured her seductively telling him to let her wash his back, commenting on his strong appearance, and insisting that they needed to clean him thoroughly. He imagined her innocent yet exciting vibe, truly the adventurer's most beautiful flower. He recalled her hands, which he had seen in the dungeon, bashing monsters' heads like it was nothing. He remembered her telling him to watch out, saying she would purify the filthy demons and ordering him to get back. The memory of her being so fierce and scary made Harris worry. Noticing his change in expression, Tiana called him Master and asked if something was wrong. Stuttering, Harris assured her it was nothing and told her to take a bath after him. Tiana agreed, as the sky began to darken. As night fell, Harris sat in the living room, enjoying a drink. Tiana approached, announcing that she had finished her bath. She worriedly mentioned that the clothes Harris lent her were a bit big and expressed disbelief that he had given her his own clothes. Harris explained that he couldn't let her wear the same clothes forever. Elated, Tiana thanked him profusely. Harris then set his cup down and remarked that it was time to sleep. Tiana agreed, bowed before him, wished him a good night, and started walking out. Confused, Harris followed her, telling her that the bedroom was in another direction. He found her arranging haystacks in the kitchen and asked what she was doing. Tiana, confused, apologized and asked if she should sleep in the barn, which worried Harris. He took her to his bedroom and explained that, although the bed was small for 2 people, she should bear with it. Tiana was surprised and protested that she couldn't sleep in the same bed as him, calling him Master. Harris insisted, explaining that it would get very cold at night, and he would be more troubled if she fell ill. He tossed her a blanket and told her to use it. Grabbing the blanket, Tiana thanked him deeply. Harris made an affirmative sound and lay down on the bed, ready to rest. Tiana found the situation unusual but slowly got onto the bed. She asked Harris if he didn't use a blanket, and he replied that they only had one. Frantic, Tiana insisted he would catch a cold. Irritated, Harris explained that compared to the dungeons, this was nothing. Tiana, frustrated, reminded him that this wasn't a dungeon and, worriedly, noted that with his work and their journey from the capital, he had a lot to deal with. She expressed her heartfelt desire for him to have a good night's rest while at home, asking if that was too much to ask. Harris smiled, appreciating her concern, and told her that he had plenty of time to relax that day, all thanks to her. He never expected she could do so much housework. Tiana thanked him, admitting she wasn't good at sewing and feared no one would take her as a wife because she was only a slave. Harris reassured her that she didn't need to be good at everything right away. He encouraged her to practice if she wasn't good at something, suggesting they could always go to a tailor for clothes. His simple and pragmatic advice made Tiana happy. Tiana then placed the blanket on him, telling him he was the first to say such kind things to her. She tucked herself in the blanket as well and lay down. Harris mentioned he would need to go shopping the next day, and Tiana eagerly volunteered to go. Harris asked if she was okay on her own, and Tiana assured him she was, though she admitted she didn't know the location of the shops. Harris promised to draw a map when he woke up, and Tiana nervously asked him to please do so. Looking back at her, Harris warmly said, "Good night." Tiana smiled and replied, "Good night, master." They both settled in, ready for a well-deserved rest. The next morning, Harris mentioned that the city had all kinds of shops, making it nearly impossible for Tiana to get lost. Tiana, feeling guilty, apologized because he ended up having to come with her anyway. Harris brushed it off, saying it was fine. He had forgotten that Tiana couldn't read, and when he handed her the map to the tailor shop, she struggled to figure out how to use it. Embarrassed, she admitted she couldn't believe she wasn't even able to shop properly. Harris patted her on the head, reassuring her that she just needed to take things step by step, learning to sew, read, and write little by little. Tiana, cheered by his words, promised to do her best with a smile. Looking at the map again, Harris pointed out that she could buy the ingredients from Marana at the store nearby, while he would head to another place. Tiana bowed to him and confidently said she would go now, heading off in another direction. Harris paused, watching her walk away, wondering if she'd really be okay on her own. Unable to shake his concern, he decided to follow her closely from behind. Tiana wandered through the city and eventually reached the store to buy the ingredients. The shop owner noticed her and warmly welcomed her, commenting that it must be her first time in their store. Tiana confirmed this, and the shopkeepers soon noticed the collar around Tiana's neck, realizing she was a slave. Curious, the shop owner asked where she came from. Tiana explained that she was under Harris's care and introduced herself. The store owner thought for a moment, and asked if she meant Harris, the adventurer who lived on the hill and had a bad eye. Tiana nodded in agreement. The shopkeeper placed a hand on Tiana's shoulder, and gently asked if she was having a hard time adjusting to her current life. She also inquired if there was anything bothering her or that she didn't like. Hiding behind a wall, Harris overheard everything they were saying. Tiana paused to think and then shared how, before they reached Norn, she had been almost attacked by orcs. This surprised the store owner, who expressed relief that Tiana was okay. Tiana went on to explain that it was her master who eliminated the orcs. The shopkeeper, intrigued, asked if it was really Harris, and Tiana confirmed it with a nod. Tiana proudly recounted the moment, repeating Harris's words, "I'll show you how a thief fights," before he took down the orcs. Harris, overhearing this, felt embarrassed, but Tiana seemed thrilled. She continued, telling the shop owner how Harris had scared the orcs, made them scatter, and easily defeated them all. The shopkeeper, now even more curious, asked if Harris was really that strong. But Tiana, with pure admiration, happily exclaimed that her master was indeed amazing. Harris, silently cringing, disagreed in his mind. Tiana also mentioned how, after that incident, Harris had given her lots of delicious food to eat. On their journey from the capital, he kept asking if her legs hurt or if she was tired, always making sure she was okay. She shared how he had been taking care of her all this time and even praised her cooking the previous day. The shop owner, smiling warmly, told Tiana that she had to make him another delicious meal today. Tiana, beaming, agreed that she would. The store owner pointed out that Harris likes to drink a lot, so he'd probably appreciate stronger seasoning in his food. She then asked Tiana how much money she had with her that day. Tiana opened her money bag and, looking at it, asked if she could buy enough for tomorrow with what she had. The store owner, surprised, asked if the money was just for one day's shopping. Worried, Tiana asked if it wasn't enough. The store owner reassured her that it was plenty, and that Harris must want her to eat a lot of food. This surprised Tiana. The store owner gently took her hand and whispered to her that if she ate more, she would become even more attractive. Tiana glanced down at her small chest with a disappointed sigh and promised to try to get into better shape. The store owner smiled, agreeing that was a good idea. Harris, watching from nearby, wondered what they were talking about. The store owner then recommended some ingredients to help Tiana get healthier, giving her a discount on some fruits as well. Tiana gratefully thanked her, and Harris, smiling, quietly left her at the store. He headed to another shop where he had left a pair of earrings to be fixed. When Harris arrived at the shop, the owner greeted him, saying the earrings were ready. As they were talking, the door opened, and in walked Tiana. She asked if this was Mr. Bach's shop. Noticing Harris, she called out to him, addressing him as Master. Harris, relieved that she hadn't gotten lost, told her he was glad she made it. Bach, the shop owner, noticed their interaction and smiled. He invited Tiana to come closer and asked for her ears. He carefully put the newly fixed earrings on her. Confused, Tiana asked what he was doing. Bach said something still felt missing. He told her to wait a minute while Harris tried to speak up. Bach rummaged around and brought out some clothes, explaining that they had been mixed in with his second-hand stock, and he had been having a hard time finding someone to buy them. He suggested that perhaps the clothes were meant for her. Tiana looked at Harris, twirled in the outfit, and he told her it looked good on her. Harris then quietly spoke to Bach, thanking him for getting rid of some old stock, and handed him some money for the clothes. Bach playfully protested, saying that the clothes were practically new, and it wasn't very kind of Harris to call them broken. Bach then commented that the way a master treats their slave reflects their own dignity, so making Tiana look nice wasn't a bad thing. He asked how much Harris had bought her for, guessing it wasn't less than 10 gold. Harris remained silent. Bach warned him that if he wasn't careful, he would face financial trouble soon. He explained that Harris was no longer just a lone adventurer. He couldn't live freely, drinking and wandering as he used to. This revelation shocked Harris, who sighed in frustration. Tiana, noticing his mood, asked if something was wrong. Tiana then shyly protested that the clothes were too expensive for her to wear. Bach waved off her concerns, telling her not to worry. Before they left, Bach advised Harris to visit the Adventurers Guild because Jonathan had been worried all morning and would likely have a good job lined up for him. With that, Harris and Tiana made their way to the guild. As they arrived, Tiana asked if this was the Adventurers Guild. Just then, Jonathan spotted Harris and called out, saying he had arrived at the perfect time. Jonathan explained that a new party had gone into the dungeon yesterday and had not returned yet. Harris asked if they had been missing for the entire day, and Jonathan confirmed they had, so they were preparing to send out a search party. Harris speculated that maybe one of the rookies had gotten carried away and made a mistake. Jonathan, however, explained that he had warned them not to go down the stairs near the dungeon entrance. He always cautioned adventurers not to go down there because it was a confusing area where people easily got lost, and the monsters were far too strong for new adventurers. If they weren't careful, they could be defeated quickly, which made Tiana nervous. Jonathan had wanted to ask experienced adventurers for help, but they didn't have enough people. That's when he remembered Harris had returned to Norn the day before, so he asked if Harris could go check the dungeon. As Harris considered the request, an adventurer standing behind him approached and asked if she could speak with them for a moment. She wanted to know if she could join the search party with Harris. The next morning, before heading into the dungeon, Harris reassures Tiana not to worry too much. He pats her head gently and tells her he'll be leaving now. Tiana, concerned but supportive, wishes him a safe trip and prays for his safe return. As Harris heads toward the dungeon with his group, one of the adventurers mentions that they can finally see the entrance. Another comments that although half a day's journey from Norn sounds close, it felt far. They express concerns about returning before nightfall, eager to finish quickly and get back home. The female adventurer from before, Gina, tells them not to get too relaxed. It's not a field trip after all. They agreed and asked for her name. She introduces herself as Gina and insists they remember the name of the person they're adventuring with. The armored adventurer introduces himself as Compass, and he also introduces the other members of the group, Soy, and Ted. As they exchange greetings, Compass expresses his excitement about working together, though Gina feels slightly uneasy about the group's dynamic. Before entering the dungeon, Harris gathers everyone for a final briefing. Their mission is clear: to search for the missing newbie party. First, they'll explore the first floor, but if there's no sign of the missing party there, they will leave the dungeon. Ted asks if they'll be heading to the second floor, and Harris grimly responds that if the rookies made it to the second floor, they are likely dead, and their only job would be to retrieve their belongings. Ted questions if the second floor is really that dangerous, and Harris explains that there are giant ogres and trolls, along with monsters from the fourth floor, lurking there. Ted and Soy confidently declare that it won't be a problem, which leads Harris to realize they've never been past the fourth floor and don't understand the dangers. Gina, on the other hand, calmly states that she can cast level 4 magic, surprising everyone. She insists that they should at least search the second floor and, even if it's too late, report their findings to the guild because that's their duty. Once inside the dungeon, the group encounters a group of goblins, which Compass, as the vanguard, manages to defeat on his own. Gina is impressed, commenting that Compass is more skilled than she expected. Harris, however, is deep in thought. He observes that the number of goblins could easily overwhelm a rookie party, but even without experience, they should have been able to defend themselves. He glances at Gina, noting that much of the party's success now rests on her abilities. Gina notices Harris staring and asks what he's thinking about. Harris reminds her that someone is still missing, and they don't know what might happen next. Gina agrees and warns everyone not to drop their guard. As they continue searching, Compass complains that there are no signs of the missing party. Suddenly, he spots a treasure chest. Ted approaches the chest, remarking that there are no signs of it being opened. Gina wonders if the missing group bypassed it and moved on. Ted, eager, suggests they open it anyway since they've already found it. Compass defers to Harris, saying it's his turn to check the chest. Harris quickly opens it, revealing no traps or monsters. Everyone is surprised at how fast he worked. Gina praises his skill, commenting that his long years of adventuring weren't just for show. Harris simply replies that it's how he makes his living. Someone jokes that they should lock their doors more carefully around him, but Gina defends him, reminding everyone that Harris is a skilled scout. Harris, appreciative, thanks her. Compass, eyeing the treasure, can't believe it wasn't looted already, suggesting that the missing group might have skipped the first floor entirely and gone straight down to the second. Deciding to descend further, they carefully head to the second floor. As they walk down the stairs, Ted suddenly urges everyone to be quiet. Harris asks what's wrong, and Ted points ahead. Harris looks and spots demon wolves lurking in the hallway. They haven't noticed the group yet, but there's no way forward without confronting them. Harris warns that the wolves could block their escape route if they aren't dealt with. Compass, seeing an opportunity, suggests that Gina use her magic to take them all out in one hit, since they're only demon wolves. Gina, taken aback by the suggestion, hesitates. Harris agrees that a level 4 spell should be powerful enough to handle them, urging Gina to act. Gina, gathering herself, prepares her spell, Ice Break, and aims at the wolves. She successfully hits one, and the group compliments her. But Harris notices the rest of the wolves charging toward them. Compass and Soy quickly block their advance, but one wolf leaps toward Gina and Harris. In a split second, Harris throws a torch at the wolf, setting it on fire, then finishes it off with his sword. After the battle, Compass remarks that it took 3 of them to defeat a single demon wolf, while Harris handled one alone. Harris modestly responds that he just knows how to deal with wolves, adding that Gina's initial attack weakened it. Gina, relieved, says she's glad she could help, but Harris asks her why she used Ice Break. He explains that while it's a powerful spell, ice-based magic is ineffective against wolves, and she should have used Firebolt instead, since it has a flame attribute. Gina, embarrassed, admits that Ice Break is her strongest spell, and it's the only offensive magic she can cast. Harris, clearly disappointed, questions her further, and Gina apologizes for not mentioning it earlier. As they continue walking, Gina bumps into Compass, who has suddenly stopped. Confused, she asks what's wrong. The entire group goes silent as they come upon several bodies on the ground. Harris immediately recognizes one of them. The party stumbles upon the bodies of the missing newbie group, and the sight makes Gina feel incredibly uncomfortable. Compass somberly comments that they didn't make it in time, while Harris, though expecting it, still finds it hard to stomach. He notes that they can at least still identify the faces and genders, which is fortunate for the guild's records. As they take stock of the bodies, Gina, overcome with nausea, asks to step away, covering her mouth as she fights the urge to vomit. Harris, concerned, tells her not to wander too far and advises Compass that they need to ensure the bodies match the guild's documentation. He suggests they split up, though Soy and Ted seem hesitant. Harris hands Compass a list, instructing him to check the bodies against it. Once finished, they'll gather the party's belongings and burn the bodies. Compass remarks that the newbies had terrible luck, facing demon wolves on their first dungeon run. Harris disagrees, noting that the wounds on the bodies are too minimal for wolves to have caused the deaths. It's likely the wolves found them after they had already died. He begins to suspect something more sinister happened, and upon closer inspection, he discovers puncture wounds in one of the bodies. After Compass confirms that his task is complete, Harris finishes his checks as well, and they proceed to burn the bodies. As they wrap up, Compass remarks how exhausting the task was and asks if all the bodies were accounted for. However, they realize that Gina is missing. Concerned, they can't see her anywhere. Gina, meanwhile, is wandering the dungeon alone, still feeling nauseous. Reflecting on how she had lectured the others, she feels ashamed for showing this weaker side of herself. She resolves to apologize when she returns to the group. But suddenly, something drops from the dungeon's ceiling. It's a snake. Startled, Gina lets out a terrified scream. Harris, Compass, Soy, and Ted heard her cry for help and rushed toward her. When they arrive, they see a mass of snakes on the ground in front of Gina. Harris quickly identifies them as ice snakes and realizes these creatures were likely responsible for the bite marks on the newbie party's bodies. The snakes must have been the real threat that the rookies couldn't handle. Soy panics, screaming about the snakes, while Ted yells that one bit him. Compass, also startled, shouts for them to retreat, and the three adventurers flee without hesitation. Harris tries to call them back, but it's no use, they've already abandoned the fight. He notices Gina is paralyzed with fear and quickly scoops her up, telling her they need to run for the exit. Harris and Gina manage to escape the dungeon swiftly, but Harris notes that the other three adventurers are nowhere to be seen. He assumes they must have gone back to Norn on their own. As they catch their breath, Gina thanks Harris for saving her and asks if he was bitten by the snakes. He admits he was bitten on the neck but downplays it, saying the poison won't kill him quickly, so he's fine for now. Suddenly, Gina screams again. Harris, alarmed, asks what's wrong, and Gina exclaims that a snake has gotten inside her clothes. Harris tries to help by pulling up her clothes to shake the snake loose, but this embarrasses Gina, who slaps him reflexively. Shocked and in pain, Harris shouts that it hurt and asks why she did that. Gina, flustered, apologizes, saying it was an instinctive reaction. After managing to remove the snake, Harris kills it and turns to Gina, addressing the issue of the poison. He asks if she has any antidotes on her, but Gina admits she doesn't. Normally, there would be a priest in the party to handle this, but with their small group, they didn't have that luxury. Harris, a little frustrated, tells her not to rely on others so much and checks her wounds. He sees that she's been bitten several times, some dangerously close to her heart. If left untreated, the poison could kill her before they even reach Norn. Harris reveals that he only has one dose of antidote left. If he gives it to Gina, he'll have to go back to Norn without it, which means he'll need expensive treatment to survive. He offers her the antidote, but with a price, 2 gold coins with 10% interest per year. Harris leaves the decision to Gina. Reluctantly, Gina agrees to his terms. She formally declares, I, Gina the magician, born on June 3rd, in the year of the chicken, hereby make a contract that I owe a debt of 2 gold coins with 10% interest per year. After the agreement, she drinks the antidote, grateful to Harris for saving her life. With Gina treated, Harris tells her that it's time to head back. He plans to visit the temple to deal with his own poisoning, while Gina should go to the guild and report their findings. Gina, still feeling indebted, thanks Harris once again, but he tells her not to worry, he's been paid, and that's all that matters. When Harris returns home, Tiana, looking unusually cheerful, greets him warmly. Her early morning energy surprises him, and he suggests she could have stayed in bed longer. Concerned, she asks if he was injured, to which Harris replies that he spent some time at the temple for treatment before coming home. Her worry deepens at the mention of the temple, but Harris reassures her, claiming it was nothing more than a few scratches. Tiana seems to relax, but as she does, Harris's stomach lets out a loud growl, reminding him he hadn't eaten yet. Tiana immediately offers to prepare him something to eat, only to realize they're low on ingredients. Harris, thinking ahead, mentions his plan to collect his reward from the guild after a bit of rest, then stop by the market for groceries. He invites Tiana to come along, and they head out together. At the guild, Harris is surprised when Jonathan hands him 8 silver coins instead of the expected 4. Jonathan explains that the extra silver is a bonus for recovering the belongings of the fallen adventurers, and a partial reward from the 3 vanguards. Harris, wary, asks if those 3 might complain about it, but Jonathan assures him they forfeited their full payment after abandoning the rear guard. Gina had told Jonathan everything, including how Harris gave her his only antidote despite being poisoned himself, a fact that would have made treatment expensive. As Harris nervously laughs it off, he notices Tiana glaring at him, clearly furious. To escape the growing tension, Harris quickly tells Jonathan it's time for them to leave, and Jonathan excitedly bids them farewell. Once outside, Harris remains on edge, sensing Tiana's anger. Trying to defuse the situation, he suggests they head straight to the market for shopping, but Tiana, her voice sharp with frustration, calls his name. Harris nervously changes the subject, talking about how hungry he is and how he's excited for lunch. But Tiana calls his name again, louder this time, her anger evident. She confronts him, saying he told her his injury wasn't a big deal, but Harris insists that he's safe now, and that's what matters. Tiana, clearly upset, retorts that everything is not fine. Harris, confused and worried, tries to understand what she means. He reminds her that, with no other family, he's all she has. He then assures her that he'll plan so that, if anything happens to him, she'll be taken care of. But Tiana shakes her head, telling him that isn't what she meant. Her words only deepen his confusion. Later, when they return home, Harris continues to glance at Tiana, wondering if she's still upset about the morning's events. Despite her mood, the food she prepares looks more extravagant than usual, which only heightens his unease. As they sit in the kitchen, a sudden knock on the door startles them both. A voice calls out for Harris, asking if he's home. Tiana glances at Harris, asking if he wants her to answer it. Harris shakes his head and says he'll get it. When he opens the door, he's shocked to see a man standing there, accompanied by a horse. The man greets him with a knowing smile, leaving Harris speechless. Harris opens the door to find his old friend Zek standing there, bringing a wave of nostalgia with him. The two had been in the same party back in the day, and they laugh as they reminisce, especially about Zek's decision to quit adventuring to become a holy knight, a choice no one, especially the women, wanted him to make. Harris teases him for it, still finding it amusing that Zek made such a dramatic career shift. But as much as Harris jokes, he'd always encourage Zek to pursue his dreams, telling him to live without regrets. Now that Zek has achieved his goal, he still makes time to visit Harris, their bond unbroken by the change. However, Harris knows Zek's visit isn't just about a trip down memory lane. He questions if something has happened with the Divine Dragon King, the only person Harris believes could have Zek running errands. Zek's face darkens momentarily, and Harris, feeling the weight of that expression, jokingly warns him to be careful with his words. Zek counters, saying he wouldn't want the task of beheading an old friend who knows too much. But the tension breaks as Harris reassures a visibly worried Tiana that there's nothing to fear. When Zek asks if Tiana made the meal, she nervously wonders if he didn't like it. Instead, Zek praises her cooking, even playfully saying he'd love to eat it every day. Harris shoots back with a grin, accusing Zek of trying to steal Tiana away from him. Zek, not missing a beat, jokes that Tiana won't be able to make much with Harris's income anyway, but Harris stands firm, refusing to let Zek's teasing get to him. Zek pokes fun at Harris, claiming that scouts like him are often underestimated. He even suggests that if Harris had still been wasting away drunk, he would have dragged him to the capital. But Zek adds a serious note, saying he can't fully trust Harris because he constantly makes Tiana worry. Harris tries to protest, but a sharp glance from Tiana says otherwise. Zek smirks and tells her that Harris isn't exactly the most sensitive person. Harris counters, joking that Zek's been more arrogant since becoming a holy knight. Zek agrees, saying that palace life requires a lot of careful consideration and that it's exhausting, but it's also made him bolder for other reasons. As Zek explains, this attitude is fitting for dealing with certain people who care too much about rumors and cut ties. Harris laughs, claiming he'd love to meet someone who'd want to cut ties with Zect. In response, Zect offers to hand him a mirror, drawing another laugh from his friend. Zect turns to Tiana, suggesting that it's better to say things directly, but she only tells him to go home after he's done eating. Not one to overstay his welcome, Zect promises he won't linger too long, though he does ask for a second helping of Tiana's delicious food. After they finish their meal, Zect prepares to leave, hopping on his horse. As he departs, Harris jokes about charging him for the food next time. Zect laughs it off, telling Tiana to take care of Harris before heading out. Once Zect is gone, Tiana comments on how wonderful Zect is, noting how happy Harris seemed while talking with him. Her observation leaves Harris unexpectedly quiet, which makes her worry that she might have said something wrong. But Harris quickly assures her that she didn't, his silence simply reflecting how much he appreciated the time spent with his old friend. As Harris steps back into the house, he lets out a relieved sigh, noting that the noisy guest, Zect, has finally left. Ready for some much-needed rest, he announces that he's heading to bed. Tiana, still busy with her housework, is about to continue when Harris interrupts her, insisting that she should rest too. He gently reminds her that she's also been running on little sleep, urging her to leave the chores for later. Tiana, grateful for his concern, assures him that she slept well the night before and tells him to rest up, not wanting him to worry. Harris heads to bed, reminding her to wake him up by dinner if he hasn't gotten up by then, so he doesn't miss out on the meal. With a renewed sense of determination, Tiana returns to her work. She fetches a bucket of water from the well and begins washing the clothes, her humming a soothing accompaniment to the rhythmic motion of scrubbing. As she washes, she takes a closer look at Harris's underwear and realizes that it's on the verge of falling apart. She decides she'll need to discuss this with him later, feeling a bit concerned about its condition. Meanwhile, Harris wakes up from his nap, feeling he could have used a bit more rest. As he gets up, he notices Tiana standing anxiously by his room. She apologizes for disturbing him and explains that they need to go out shopping again, revealing that she should have bought more supplies earlier. She feels bad for making Harris go out, but he playfully blames Zect for eating all their food. Realizing he might not always be available to go out with her, Harris tells Tiana she needs to learn how to read, write, and calculate. Though he suspects she doesn't yet possess these skills, he knows she's a quick learner. He suggests starting with the basics of letters and calculation methods, which will help her not only in shopping but also in reading books at home. Despite his encouragement, he acknowledges that teaching can be a challenging task. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of a loud argument outside. Harris peeks out and spots Gina in a heated dispute with her landlord about unpaid rent. Gina insists she has already paid, but the landlord remains unconvinced and angrily suggests she should quit adventuring if she can't manage her rent. In a fit of frustration, Gina demands that the landlord direct his complaints to his nephew. Gathering her belongings, she finally notices Harris and tries to regain her composure, attempting to appear unaffected by the confrontation. After the commotion with her landlord, Gina vents about being kicked out, feeling unfairly treated for being late on rent despite informing him beforehand. Tiana sympathizes, expressing that throwing out Gina's belongings was too harsh. Curious about each other, Tiana introduces herself to Gina, who finds her endearing and wishes she could be her child. Harris interjects, noting Gina doesn't have money or a place to stay for the night. Harris asks Gina about the incident with the landlord and if she knows what triggered his harsh reaction. Gina reveals that the landlord is Soy's uncle from their previous Vanguard Trio days. When Gina reported their behavior, Soy likely complained to his uncle, resulting in her eviction. Harris acknowledges that the situation escalated unnecessarily, and Gina admits it's why she's been drinking more lately. Gina proposes a toast to finding the perfect companions in Harris and Tiana. Tiana asks Gina about her plans now, and Gina considers moving to another town. She wants to continue her side job teaching reading, writing, and magic, which earns her about 12 silver coins monthly. Harris is puzzled why she's out of money despite earning well, and Gina explains that being a mage is costly, especially with expensive magic scrolls outside the capital. Harris suggests Gina teach Tiana, as he's been looking for someone suitable. Gina loves the idea but hesitates due to her current living situation. Tiana proposes that Harris rent out their spare room to Gina, suggesting they live together. Gina initially hesitates about sharing a small space, but Harris assures her there's a spare room with shared kitchen and dining areas. Her rent would be teaching Tiana how to read and write, which Gina happily agrees to. Excited, Tiana starts calling Gina sensei, but Gina suggests she use her first name since they'll be living together. Tiana then asks if she can call Gina sister, surprising Gina, who asks Tiana why she wants to. Tiana admits she's always wanted a sister, which warms Gina's heart. Harris asks if he can use Gina's first name too, to which she agrees without complaint. Harris apologizes for potentially dampening the mood earlier, clarifying that their previous conversation about the debt and their new living arrangement are separate matters. Gina assures him she'll pay back what she owes now that they'll be living together. Tiana is thrilled to start learning from Gina, and the three of them leave together, looking forward to their new living arrangement.
Alright, that's a wrap for today. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. And if you're new here, sub before the algorithm forgets I exist. Drop your favorite moment in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.